everybody, I'm Dave Thomas, and this time I'm building the Rocketarium Retro Rebel. And this is something like a 3D rocket puzzle, if you like. Very much a different rocket here, and certainly not very aerodynamic, but it does fly nonetheless. So let's open this thing up and make sure we have all the parts, and we can start with the build. Strangely, the instructions don't have a list of parts that we usually find with Rocketarium kits, but I think we can go through and kind of eyeball everything. Okay, so here we have the ring set that will make up the ribs, so to speak. Alright. Parachute, mine was tucked away inside the instructions, so if you don't see yours, it might be there. And then inside this big bag here, okay, these are the struts for the fins and the lower part of the rocket. And then we have the same thing here for the upper part of the rocket. Okay, an 18 millimeter motor mount sub-assembly. This has its own instructions. Okay, a body tube. And a coupler and a smaller tube. Let's make sure I've got wherever that goes to here. Okay, so this is going to go all the way to the top, looks like. Yeah, and then we've got a shock cord and a bulk plate and a screw eye here that will go up to the so-called nose cone, even though this doesn't have a true nose cone. So as far as I can tell, everything is here, and we should be able to get started. So here's our motor mount sub-assembly, and Rocketarium also sells this as a separate part in addition to putting them in their own kits here. So if you just need a motor mount for your own project, you can get one of these as well. Alright, so we are going to first of all take the thrust ring here, the green ring, and we're going to put some glue at about 3/4 of an inch inside either end of the motor mount tube. And then once we do that, that will be the forward end. So here I'm just going to use some wood glue and a cotton applicator. Okay, and I'm just going to estimate 3/4 of an inch, right about there. Alright, and then we're going to put the ring into the aft end, followed by this yellow spacer, and then we just turn this up, and that will push the thrust ring into the glue there. And then we immediately want to take that spacer out so that it does not become glued inside if we had too much excess glue there. Alright, then we're going to measure 2 3/4 inches from the aft end. It's going to put this right here. Okay, and then we're going to cut approximately 1/8 of an inch slot into this. And you should feel this coming out right over the thrust ring there. All right, if it's not going, just move up a little bit there. There it is. Okay, then you will take the motor clip here and just In this case, they're identical ends, so I would just pick whichever one looks rougher than the other. And that will just poke through here. Okay, and then the locking ring is going to go in 1.25 inches from the aft end. So that's this guy here. And so I'm first going to mark this. Alright, so 1.25 inches will be right there. Okay, and so this locking ring is just going to slide down to that point. Okay, so we're just going to put some glue right here. And this can also be either wood glue or white glue. Okay, I'm just going to put that over. Alright. Next, alright, so we have 2 rings left. One of these has a slot in it, and this is actually made of plywood. It's kind of unique. Alright, the one that's still made out of cardboard or paper here, this is going to fit right over the end there of the clip. Okay, so again here I'll just get a little bit of glue on my applicator. Slide that ring into it. Okay, and then the last part, the aft ring is going to go up 1/4 inch or 6 millimeters from the base, from the aft end. Alright, so 6 millimeters is right there. Now on this one, you do want to be careful that you don't get glue near the clip. I'm going to start with my glue a little bit below that line, and then it will get pushed forward by the ring here. Okay, so now I'll push that up till I find my line again. Okay, and I'm going to let that dry for a few minutes before we go on. While I'm waiting for the motor mount to dry, I'm going to skip down a step here and put the nose cone tube assembly together, and then we'll come back and install the motor mount into the body tube. So for this one, we need the short white tube as well as the coupler, and the coupler may be inside the white tube there. So if you can't find it, check in that spot. And we need to measure 7/8 of an inch on the coupler. Alright, which is supposed to be about halfway. And this coupler actually looks to be 1.5 inches, so it should be 3/4 of an inch is halfway. Next thing to do is add some glue up inside the short tube here. I'm just going to put this around the edge, and then I'll push the coupler through it until I meet that halfway point. Okay, give it a little twist back and forth there. And we'll let that dry. And then we need this bulk plate that's in a little small parts bag here. Okay. So now we're going to screw this into the hole just to give it some threads. And it is tight. It's a small hole for such a big screw. Okay, we'll try the other side here. There we go. Okay, I'm going to pull that back out. And we're going to put some glue on that. Get some glue down inside the hole there. And then once more we'll thread this through. Okay, I'm going to go until I can just see one full thread width left there. And then on the side that's got the screw sticking out of it now, I'm just going to wipe that around where it meets the bulk plate. And just put some glue around that. Okay. And then what we're going to do is just glue this in here. Okay. So what the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to put some glue around the inside of the coupler. Alright, and then I'm going to slide this in kind of sideways and then bring it up. And give it a little bit of a twist and then pull it almost out again. So I'm going to leave just a little bit of a lip there. And then I will go around that with some glue. And just use my finger to get rid of the excess here. Alright, so we form a fillet around the bulk plate. And now I'm going to let the whole assembly dry. Now we're ready to insert the motor mount into the main body tube. And for this I am going to measure 2.5 inches on my applicator here. So about there. Alright, I'm going to get glue on the applicator, and I'm going to stick the applicator in without touching until I hit my thumbnail, and then I'm just going to rotate that around. Okay, and I'm going to slide this about that far. Now this is easier to do with bigger body tubes. Alright, but I'm going to put some glue around the inside edge of the body tube. Now I'm getting kind of sloppy here and getting it on the motor mount yet. That's alright. It won't hurt the motor mount. Alright, and then I'm going to push this in. Uh-oh. Okay, my glue is starting to grab there already. Okay, I'm going to push this in until the motor mount tube is flush with the body tube. So the clip should be hanging out there. And if you have any glue on the outside, just wipe that off. Okay, and that's ready to go. That can be set aside once more. Alright, next we're going to put the nose cone together. And so essentially the way this is going to be built is some of the discs here will be used for the nose, and then some will be used for the tail. And what we need to do here is open this up and first of all make sure that they are sorted properly. Okay, so in a stack, if they've not shifted during packing and shipment and such, then they're numbered, the smallest being number 1 and the largest being number 9, all the way down here. Okay, and so for the nose cone, we need the 1 and the 2. Okay, and then the 5, which will be this one, has no hole in it, also. And then the 7, so that would be 6, and this one's 7. So I'm going to put the rest of those aside. All right, and then we're going to take the vertical pieces here. Alright, and now the first thing we're going to do is dry fit these. Okay, so just start with one of the ribs, and the holes here will be the launch guides. So it doesn't matter where you put them as long as you keep them lined up all the way down. Go. And this one. Alright, and then we'll put each of the ribs Okay, now I'm not going to put the other 2 on quite yet because you need to make a decision at this point. After we make sure everything fits together the way it should, think about how you are going to finish this. Now in the illustration on the package, it shows it unfinished, and so you could leave it that way. I would suggest at minimum though, giving this a light sanding to take off all the burn marks here and the scorch marks from the laser cutter. Okay, and you can do that with just some medium to fine grit sandpaper, and then put this all back together again. Alright, now once we've got it the way you want it sanding wise, then we'll glue all this together with cyanoacrylate glue. Now you could use wood glue or white glue, but I think the reasoning for the cyanoacrylate here is that it's going to dry clear, and so you won't notice that you've got glue going on here. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to sand the wood here. I'm going to use some 150 grit sandpaper on a sanding tee. And I'm just sanding with the grain. Okay, and this is going to knock down a lot of the heavier parts of the grain, as well as remove a lot of the scorch marks here. I think I'm actually going to leave the outer scorching there. It just makes a nice contrasting color. Alright, so here's one. You'll also want to decide whether or not you want to put a sanding sealer of some sort on here. And if you're going to actually paint this, I would recommend that. And in fact, you might even want to consider painting the wood before you assemble it. Now, if you decide to do that, be prepared to have to do some sanding in between all these slots and such, because if you paint this first, it's going to be thicker and may not fit into the slots correctly. In addition, the glue is not going to hold as well if you're applying it over paint instead of on bare wood. So that's something to think about. On mine, I'm going to assemble this unpainted and then just leave it as the wood and probably give a clear coat on top of it. Okay. So I'm going to do the rest of these off camera, and then we'll come back and put things together. I've sanded everything for the nose cone now, and I've also dry fit the short body tube here. And so this is going to slide inside here and will get glued to plate number 5 here. And so this will be inserted into the main body tube. And so when the ejection charge blows, this whole piece comes out. All right. Now, they also mention disc number 9. Now this actually is part of the lower part of the rocket, but they suggest using this as a guide. Okay, so to go ahead and put the slots in there, but we're not going to glue this. Okay, so I'm going to take this back out. Okay, and then we're going to apply glue as fillets on each one of these joints. So take some thin cyanoacrylate, super glue here. I wouldn't use the really watery kind, just the regular kind here, and just flow that into each of these joints. And you'll do it on both sides. Now I will come back and put the other ribs on here in just a moment. This is just giving me much easier access if I don't put them on first. And mainly I'm allowing capillary action here to just pull the glue in. Okay, and don't forget the bottom sides of these as well. Alright, now I'm going to put disc 9 on, but I am not going to glue it here. Okay, I'm just doing this to make sure everything is still spaced the way it should be. Alright, and then I'm going to repeat this for the other side here. And of course, whenever you're working with super glue, careful not to glue your fingers to it. Okay, so that's for the first 2 ribs. I'm going to put the other 2 on and glue them off camera. Here I have the nose cone all glued together, and I only managed to glue my fingers to it twice. And this is the 9th disc here And again, it's not glued in place, it's just acting as a holder there to keep everything aligned while the glue sets. So I'm going to allow this to set up for at least 20 minutes here before I go on. And then in the meantime, I'm going to sand the other wood parts for the aft end of the rocket. My nose cone assembly has been drying for some time now, and I've also sanded the rest of the wood. Our next task is to glue the small body tube here onto the nose cone. All right, and according to the instructions, we should use wood glue for this. Now, what I want to make sure and be careful of is that I don't have a lot of sloppy glue around here. And so I'm going to do a couple of things here. I'm going to, first of all, just slide that in. So here I'm going to mark right where the body tube meets disc number 7. Okay. And I'm also kind of giving myself a visual here of where the body tube is going to contact the next ring. I'm just going to mark the ring lightly here in a couple of places. Alright, so there I've got 2 little dots in there. And so I'll apply some glue onto the disc there. Okay, so I'm going to get this right up to my marks there. Okay, and then I'm also going to get some more glue. I'm going to get a new applicator here. And for the tube itself, I'm going to use some Elmer's glue. You could use another white glue if you wanted to. The reason I'm using this is because it won't show up as much. So I'm going to put a bead of glue just above my little line there and kind of estimate as I'm going around. And the idea here is that when I put this in, it'll scrape the glue up against the ring. Alright, so now I'm going to slide this in. There we go. And then just make sure it's flat against the disc in front of it. And it looks like it made good contact there all around. So I'm going to let this dry inverted. Take a dry applicator here, as I really can't get my finger there. I'm going to go ahead and just form this into a fillet so we don't have lumps of glue on the edge there. And now I'm going to hit it again on the outside so I don't have that ring sitting there. There we go. Alright, so I'll let this dry inverted like this, and then if necessary I can come back and add fillets of either Elmer's glue or other white glue or some cyanoacrylate glue. Okay, for the base of the rocket, the assembly is going to be pretty much the same, except it's going to be backwards in disc size. So here, I'm going to start with disc 9, the largest of them. All right, and as we did before, we need to make sure that the launch guide holes are lining up. Okay, and then we have disc 8, which is one of these with the big circles, big cutouts in them. Okay, and then disc 6. All right, since they have such large cutouts, we don't need to worry about the launch guide there. All right, then disc 4, we're back to having a launch guide. And disc 3, oh, we're off one here. All right, so disc 9 is going to be all the way up here. All right, then we'll have disc 8. I'm going to take 9 back off. There we go. Okay, I'm going to leave 9 alone for a moment, so I can just concentrate on the rest. Now, eventually, the body tube is going to fit up through the rings here, like that, and then we'll have disc 9 over this, and then the whole nose cone assembly will fit on top of that. Okay, so just like we did with the top one, while I've only got 2 of the ribs in place here, I'm going to go ahead and do my first cyanoacrylate fillets, and then I'll add the other 2 rings there. I meant to say other 2 ribs, not rings. Alright, so here I'm just going to add my super glue again. Now these rings seem to have a bit more play in them than the top ones did, so I'm going to go ahead and put the other ribs on here just to help keep everything stable. This means it'll take a little bit more finagling to get in to where I need to. That does stabilize the rings a lot more. And then I'm just going to continue down and do each joint on each level as we go along here, but I'll do that off camera. Alright, I have all the glue joints done except for the top one here. So I'm going to go ahead and put that into place. and there's just enough space in there so that the base of the nose cone will still fit into there. And so I want to be careful not to fill that in with any of the glue. Now fortunately, since this is cyanoacrylate, it doesn't fill things very much. I'm just going to do this one from the bottom. Alright, and the key here is to keep that disc squashed down upon the ribs there. You don't want it moving up on you, because we don't want it to be uneven. Like there, that should not have that gap there. Alright, so I'm going to squash everything down good again. Okay, and now I'm going to let that entire assembly dry for about 20 minutes. Almost had a dreadful emergency there. Make sure that the hole in disc 9 lines up with the other ones down here on the aft end. Fortunately, I was able to pull that apart before the glue set. Alright, so now it's ready to go. Our next step after all of the wood has dried will be to put the main body tube up inside, but we can skip a little bit here, so I'm going to go to the shock cord attachment while we're waiting for glue to dry. And so for that we go to the last page here and cut out the shock cord mount, or if you don't want to destroy the instructions, you can simply make a photocopy and cut it out. Okay, then we take our shock cord here. Alright, and we're going to glue this at a little bit of an angle here so that as it folds up, it lays down next to itself here instead of piling up on top where it creates a greater obstruction. So here you can use white glue or wood glue. I'm going to use a fairly heavy bead here because I want all that glue to squish throughout it. Alright, and then once again I'm going to lay this at a bit of an angle. Alright, I'll just kind of smooth the glue out. And make sure to have a tissue handy here. Alright, so now we're just going to fold this over. So the B is going to get folded into the A. Alright. And it might be a good idea to have some protection on your tabletop so you don't get glue all over it like I just did. Alright, and then that's going to fold over the C. And I'm going to drag that over so now it's the two parts of the shock cord there are right next to each other. All right, and now I'm going to bend this into a curve so that it will fit inside my tube easier. All right, and then while everything is still wet, I'm going to add some more glue to this. And the idea here is to have a nice uniform film so that when this dries there are no air gaps and everything is firmly glued to the inside of the body tube. Okay, and now this needs to go down as far as you can possibly get it. It needs to go at least an inch, preferably more, so that it does not hang up on the coupler. So I'm just going to push this as far down as I can. If you have long, skinny fingers, now is the time to put those to use. Alright. And then I'm just going to press this against my hand. Kind of squeegee the glue out of there. Okay, so now if we look down inside, you can see it up against the inner wall there. See a little bit of glue sticking out. See if I can smooth that in. There we go. Okay, so you want it as flat against the body tube as possible so that you have less chance of the parachute hanging up on it. Right, so now I'm going to let this dry, and when we come back all of our glue should be dried and we can put the whole thing together. Now all the cyanoacrylate glue has dried on both pieces. Now I'm going to take the main body tube here, and first of all I'll just wrap up the shock cord and then just stick that in. Keep it out of the way. Alright, and we're going to run this up through all the discs. Now if you have a lot of resistance here, you may need to do a little sanding. Okay, and I'm going to bring this up until I am flush with the base. Alright, and now I'm going to insert this. Okay, and align all the holes there. And I'm going to need to move the camera up a little bit. Okay, so at this point I've got about a 1/4 inch gap there between this rib and disc 9, and that's what we want. Alright, and now we're going to run some glue around the top of disc 9 here, and then disc 4 and 3 down here on the bottom. And it indicates, again, using wood glue. I'm going to use white glue, again, so that I don't have the discoloration here. This will blend easier. I'm just going to essentially make a fillet of glue around this. Okay, now for the lower ones, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. I'm going to try this with an applicator stick. I don't think I want to use a cotton applicators. That's going to make too much mess. Whereas I'm sure I can make an appropriate mess just with this. And part of the reason I'm using white glue as well is just this does take a little bit of time, and wood glue tends to tack up too quickly. Now there are a few long working time wood glues like Titebond 3, that would work here as well. But the short working time ones that I usually use, I think will be too short. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing on this bottom ring. Now, with all that in place, I'm going to realign this. Okay. And now I'm going to push down and lock everything in place here. So all of my ribs should be down in the slots of ring 9 there. And I've got a little bit of a discrepancy there. We'll just have to work it in. And we do want to be careful that we don't break anything here. And let's move most of the glue down into a fairly decent fillet. Now if you want, you can take a cotton applicator and do your best to remove excess glue. Now I'm just going to hold on to the tube there and pop that back out, so I've got better access. Here I can use my finger to go ahead and smooth all that around. Alright, but for the other ones, my finger's not going to get very far in there. And even though there's quite a bit of glue to worry about there, I'm trying to... Alright, our final task then is to put the shock cord onto the nose cone. So I need to poke that back out. Alright, and according to the instructions, they're using a fancy improved clinch knot, also called a fisherman's knot, or one type of fisherman's knot. I don't think you have to go quite that far, but you can if you want. So the way you do this, alright, so I'm going to make a loop here, about that far, so you need to give yourself some room, and then just put a twist into it a few times here. Alright, and then you're going to put the free end through the loop of elastic at the bottom. I've never done this with elastic before. Usually you do it on a filament line. Right. And then we tighten the whole thing down from both directions. Like that. And we'll just put a little bit of glue here on the knot. Work that in so it doesn't come loose. And then I'm just going to snip off everything but about a 1/4 inch there. Alright, and we will let that dry for a while. Okay, so our last step structurally is to assemble the parachute. And that's mostly done for us. Now, according to the instructions, they tie the parachute directly onto the screw eye of the nose cone. And if you've ever seen any of my videos, I don't like to do that. So instead, I'm going to use a snap swivel here. And you can get those from just about any place that has fishing supplies. Right, and I'm going to gather up all the loops of my parachute on one finger here, and I'm going to hold the parachute in its center with my other hand. Okay, so all of the corners should pretty much come together there, and if they don't, just kind of move the strings until they do. Alright, so over here, I'm going to pinch off my strings so they don't move. And I'll bring this loop down to a point. And I'm going to stick the loop of shroud lines there through the swivel end of my snap swivel. Alright, now I'm always keeping at least one finger pinching this so they don't change lengths. Alright, now I'm going to pass the whole snap swivel through that loop. And then I'm just going to pull it down taut. And that'll form a knot here at the end of the swivel. And then I'm just going to take a little bit of glue, white glue or wood glue here. Put that on the knot. And then just work that in. Okay, so now we can easily change out the parachute, and theoretically at least, having the swivel there should decrease some of the twisting of the shroud line that always occurs during recovery. And when you're ready to mount this, simply take the snap part, put that over the screw eye, and snap it on. Alright, here is my completed Retro Rebel model rocket, and there are some warnings in the instructions about painting and motors. So if you're going to run this on B or C class black powder motors like you would get from Estes and similar, that we shouldn't paint this. The warning is that the weight of the paint and primer may cause this to exceed the safe weight for black powder motors. So if you want to paint this, you need to run it on composite motors of the D class. All right, otherwise, have a great launch, have a safe recovery, and please stay tuned for more of my videos.